what up, everybody? How's it going? 2 a.m. East Coast, sweltering heat. Beautiful, nearly full moon, 99, almost 100% right now. You can see a little bit of the Terminator on the left, about to get nice and crispy, like I am. But I had to come on here for a little bit. It's been about 3 weeks since the last stream. Almost the same amount of time. It's just been very stormy, and I've been really busy. But finally got a few nights. Set up a little bit last night, but then passed out. And then tonight, I got a little bit of energy to go, and we'll take a look at this beautiful moon. She's absolutely stunning with the sharpness and the detail tonight. It's a super moon again. And tomorrow, around like 7 or 8 p.m., it's going to be sort of on the wane again. So the real sharp full moon is going to happen about 6 to 8 hours from now, where we see the full disk, where you don't really actually see the full disk on, I think, the northern hemisphere. But close enough, looking amazing. Tomorrow, I might do another stream on the 11. This is on the back porch tonight, but I kind of want to get some Saturn and Jupiter. It's been a while since we got some planetary action. Hope everybody's doing well. I see Miguel in the chat, and we'll see if some of our friends trickle in, our lunatic buddies. Let's play some tunes here and vibe out with our Luna. Keep going with this old album. So my tracking ain't so good tonight. Moon's drifting pretty hard, but the view is still quite incredible. Just over here around Aristarchus. I just want to draw a little bit on it. We'll see. Say what's up to Truman, Fiber Oats, Cyber Sully, what's going on. Make sure you hit that 4K so you can see all the sharpness, all the crispy detail. Let me pull this up and see if I can't just center it for a moment, just tell y'all what we're looking at. It's a really good view here of Kepler, Copernicus, and Aristarchus. Well, I remember a quick shout out to Buddy for doing the Thunderbolts Project videos. Very awesome. Very, very awesome. Looks like a piece of cheese. Well, this area might not look so much like a piece of cheese. This is a little bit more like an interesting arrowhead of sorts, or a shield, or a canal. So let's quickly look at this. So Aristarchus Plateau, Aristarchus Crater, Herodotus, Schroeder's Valley. This part is what's so interesting about it. This split kind of canal or river is sort of in dispute in terms of like how that was created, whether or not that took, you know, a volcano to erupt and cause a long lava flow and then kind of harden and create a lava tube or a sinuous rill. Or was this created by high voltage electric arcing moving across the surface? Same thing here. And the reason that's the case is because you get a lot of organized geometry as residual from electric arcing versus really anything else. But in fact, that's not even the case, because I feel like electricity really defines all sorts of erosion regardless, whether or not it was fast or slow. But it is an interesting concept. Let's see. Yeah, so Aristarchus looking great. Let's move down just a little bit here. We've got Kepler. Kepler looking real small compared to the sibling Copernicus over here. Got to move over just a tiny bit so we can see the hexagonal nature of Copernicus. Get right back into the flow. So hexagon, Copernicus, and then you got Kepler up here, you got diamond shape over here. You got all these emanations. Again, was Copernicus an impact crater, or was it caused by electric voltage, high arc discharge? Always a good question. Let's keep moving here. What else we got? We'll move down and see the parallel rays moving towards Tycho or Tycho crater. That's looking really nice and sharp tonight. I feel like it got a little fuzzier. Am I crazy? Again, we got some clouds. No, it's the same. It's nice and clear. Nice and clear. Let's see if I can do something with the filter. We got some sharpness over here on Tycho. Look at that. So cool. So yeah, Tycho looking really amazing. And I see Astralis in the chat. What's going on? Hope you're doing great. I mean, I would say happy full moon to all you lunatics, because we're basically up on it. Luna's been looking amazing. It's our second super moon of the year. I think the next one is next month, and then that's kind of it until 2024, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe next year. So last super moon will be next month. I'm trying to keep going with these full moons. I keep managing to get on at the right time. Yeah, Tycho crater. Again, such an interesting feature because of not only its formation, its center peak. You've got these emanations coming off of it and going towards it. You also have certain emanations or like striations that are almost tangential. If you look to the like 8 o'clock position, you see that ray doesn't really even come off of Tycho crater. It almost feels like it's tangential. Here, let me draw that real quick. It is truly a swelter, though, lately, the last few months, but it's wonderful to have some clear skies. You see that? That goes tangential to Tycho. Very interesting. Now, granted, like, Tycho is one of those things that you see, and if you imagine those ballistic tests or impact craters, this, you know, you could argue and say this does look like a ballistic impact, but ultimately, it shows the same types of striations that we see on other craters, these kind of electrical Lichtenberg patterns that emanate. Now, I'm not unaware of the fact that like ballistic impact is ultimately, you know, manifest along the field, and the field always sort of looks like this. So ultimately, ballistic like impacts and electrical arcing will sort of look the same at the end of the day, but really it is, even if just one crater on the moon was created by electric arcing discharge from Mars or Earth or from somewhere else, it's pretty interesting. And if all of the different features were created that way, or some of them, or 50% of them, it's still like it's a monumental upending of what we know about lunar geology and geology in general. So, you know, there could be a mix of both, but it's still very interesting to see the kind of laser precision of certain types of features. Like Tycho is kind of deceptive in that way because you see all this melty kind of, yeah, melted regolith emanating from the center and these kind of arcing rays. But then you see the two parallel kind of butter knife feature moving off to the top, which, you know, may or may not be related to Tycho, but look like it really is. Hey, NGC, I see you. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. Great to see you. Happy full moon. Hey, hey, hey. Lots of love to all my lunatics in the chat. Again, you know this channel is not a flat earth channel. I'm not going to engage at all on the flat earth stuff. I do respect everybody's opinion to believe whatever they want about anything they want. But we can all agree that there's a moon that we're looking at, whether or not it's a projection or a real object, which I definitely think it's a real object. Obviously manifest of consciousness, you know. So there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about when I came back to doing the show. I figure since some people are here, I'll just quickly mention it, which is I've been watching this YouTube channel called Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove, and he does New Thinking Aloud now. It's a great kind of like one-on-one, sitting at a small table type of show, and he entertains a lot of different types of theories and different types of discussions, but it kind of dawned on me that there are certain principles that people, even thinkers and seekers and open-minded, I guess, truth seekers, as you put them on YouTube, talk about the age of Earth and the age of carbon and using carbon dating and potassium dating and half-life decay as like this absolute fundamental that is just, you know, that's the way it is, and why should we even discuss it? And I'm kind of leaving out a lot of context, but essentially these two guys were talking about this really amazing idea that human remains were found at sites that were over 1 million years old. And they just really kept sticking to the fact that it's just so amazing that things were found 1 million years ago, but they never really ever questioned the fact that maybe this rock formation or this geologic stratification is actually not 1 million years old. And I know it's one of those things that people get really touchy about, the age of Earth and aging things and dating things, but it is really fascinating that that's not even in question. It's just like, even for people who question things, they don't consider to ask whether, you know, radiometric dating, carbon dating, potassium dating can change over time, which it likely does. What's up, Lene M? Cheers from Australia. Cheers from Florida. Glad you're joining. It is so hot here. Just my brain is melting, and I got my headphones on, so it's kind of like doubly melting. But I love it. I love it. Love it. True Renzu says trying to stay respectful. Yeah, I mean, again, the whole kind of YouTube scene of like what's the shape of the Earth and what's the deepest conspiracy. You can, if you've seen this channel from the get, I kind of started off that way, and then very quickly, once I really sunk my claws and my teeth into Electric Universe stuff, it started to make a lot more sense. And like since then, you know, it's really not about questioning what the ultimate conspiracy is, even though that's definitely something, you know, I think about. But it's much more so that the knowledge is already here. You just have to like grasp it and use it and work on it as an individual and as a group, if that's what you choose to do. He'll trade me the heat. It's chilly weather. No, I had enough of the chilly weather. I think it's I'll deal with this kind of being in the womb, but it's fine. Thank you though. Gosh, I escaped to Florida because I wanted this. I asked for it. It's my karma. But yeah, so I don't even know what I was talking about. Oh right, flat Earth and the shape of the Earth and conspiracies. But yeah, I mean, it's very likely that things are, I don't know why I'm tempted to even say this, but the idea of like flatness just is one part of a larger structure. And the larger structure that you see, that I see, that I've shown on the channel, is really the donut or the torus and the hourglass shape that goes through it, which really encases a Birkeland filament. And so there are these three-dimensional primitive objects, or these shapes, this geometry that supersede, I think, the kind of flatness of things, even though you would say the dielectric inertial plane, you know, that is outlined by spiral galaxies, you know, this matter that's compressed into a disk, you know, you could argue that that's flattened out, right? But it makes more sense to me that things are kind of nested. So you have circles or spheres that expand outwards. Spheres meet spheres, create hexagonal nesting and boundary layers. And essentially planets are, you know, spheroidal until they hit or interact with stuff. And so you have planetoid size objects, and then you also... So it's interesting, if you imagine that the surface of the moon is purely turbulence. If you've ever seen like a 3D program that has noise in it, or if you've seen like just wavy noise patterns. So the scale of the noise compared to the shape of the size of the moon creates this kind of surface that we see here, this very noisy surface with features on it. But then like an asteroid or a meteor that's much smaller, the noise principle on it makes the entire thing all wobbly, and like you have these massive jutting out points, and some points are smooth and some points are concave. And so you have much more organic noise on much, you know, depending on the scale of matter that is coalesced along Birkeland filaments. So, but really ultimately being on the back of a giant turtle is really the comfort. That is four, yeah, right, the four elephants, the four, and we all float through space. I remember seeing that visual as a kid in the Rubaiyat, I think, the inverted bowl. But, you know, it's just, I think we are more multidimensional, but we are just multidimensional creatures already that are moving up the awareness principle or spiral. And the higher level awareness, the more you really just notice that we already were multidimensional beings to begin with. I think that's really the answer. The answer is that the answer was there all along. Cool. Play a little tunage here and stretch. Look at this moon. It's absolutely staggering tonight. I never cease to be amazed by the detail that one is achieved with backyard astronomy, and two, the fact that we have a moon is like just crazy. It's still not lost on me. I'm still not bored with that fact. It's just amazing. I mean, look at this thing. We get to look at another planet. Just, okay, let's look at it up close and ponder its past. Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that. I mean, I know that there have been a ton of people throughout the years who support the channel and who are very respectful, who follow Flat Earth stuff. And a lot of people ask me if the channel is a Flat Earth channel, and it's really not that, but it is a channel where everybody should be able to voice their opinion respectfully. And, you know, I mean, of course, I get to basically talk over everybody, but you know, I talk about it kindly, and I understand the, you know, the idea behind Flat Earth and Hollow Earth, and, you know, I dug into all the conspiracies very deeply, and one, because they're fascinating, two, because it does make you ask certain types of questions. I think I'm at a point now where, I said this a couple of years ago, but it's starting to make sense as to where I'm at, which is the fact that, like, once you kind of figure out something, like, for example, the electric universe, and just one aspect of it being that we are just a smaller version of the larger whole, and tiny things are smaller versions of us. And the fact that when you really, really grasp that, and you really, truly understand that we're completely an aperture of the Godhead, of the larger whole, then you could sit there and say, wow, I figured it out like 100 times. Or you could start living as if that was the case. And I think I'm kind of living as if that was the case, which may sound very conceited, but in a way it's partially why I do the show when I feel like I can do the show, and why I don't want to push, you know, and promote the channel. You know, I kind of just think it's this very special thing that allowed me to, you know, convey ideas to the broader public, but then also discover things on my own that help me deal with the world in a way that I like. All right, yeah, I was going to take a little break here for a second. Some new stuff still. From a long and away distance, lies traveling away from me. Now we decide on this new mission. Count our stars on through the trees. Ooh. there's an unknown, nobody believes it. Sometimes we just get near it, our inner voices just leave it. I've been there, I've seen shit. Our oscillators the weirdest, nobody can hear it. Sometimes we just feel it, our nature's staring beneath it. I've been ready, just go flying up till the bubbles pop from there. That's some power now, that's some power now, that's some power now, that's some power now. I've been ready, just go flying up till the bubbles pop from there. That's some power now, just that's some power now, that's some power now, that's some power now. Alright, let's just look at this for a second. So I cranked the settings so we can see some of the nice detail on Serenity and Tranquility. Super duper nice, very nice. But yeah, I just want to present a quick principle here. I love the live glitches that happen. It's just like full on. So hide that, turn this up. Alright, so just, I guess, the way I kind of present this typically is I say, look at this amazing coincidence that we have this shape, a pentagon on Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility has a hexagon. You also got a hexagon on Mare Crisium, right? And then you have a much larger hexagon, Mare Imbrium. You've got another pentagon here with Humoris. Forget this one. Nectar. Whoa, where'd it go? Nectaris, right? No, this is Fecunditatis. Nectaris again. Mare Nectaris, Sea of Nectar. And why doesn't it want to? Another hexagon. so not only is it hexagonal, right? So this idea that, oh, all lunar craters, all features are circular. Why are they so circular? Even Thunderbolts Project, not blaming them, but just saying that even them presenting this actual concept about the moon being hit by electric arcing, Stuart Talbot, who the narrator ended up was talking about it, saying that lunar craters were circular. Sorry, brain freeze. So even saying it in passing is this kind of indoctrination of saying this type of thing about the moon. But in fact, if you see it right here, like, this is very easy for anyone to do, to draw out the points that you see on the moon around all these different features, and to wonder why, like, they're actually not circular, but in fact pentagonal, hexagonal, dodecahedral, octagonal, etc. And so not just is that's like this kind of really huge, the flippening, so to speak, of this illogic of saying that the moon is circular, or features are circular. But then why do these features actually emerge is the second question. And then the answer to that is the same reason that bees create honeycomb, and the same reason molecular structures end up being looking like this is because this actually outlines a cross-section of a torus and a hypotrochoid, or an hourglass shape, that outlines a Birkeland filament, the dielectric inertial plane, and the magnetic field lines that emanate from a plasmoid right here at the center. And this plasmoid creates layers of energy that emanate outwards. And so what happens here, the reason they end up turning into Platonic angled geometry as opposed to perfectly circular points of matter. So these points of matter extend outwards, emanate outwards, basically expand like bubbles. And as these bubbles expand, they get to a point where they meet another bubble and another bubble. And so ultimately, when two bubbles meet, right here, you get an actual boundary layer. And that boundary layer ends up making a circle or a sphere end up looking hexagonal and pentagonal. And if you look at bubbles in a sink, or if you look at, like, this is a very crude version of it, but if you look at honeycomb, this is how bees actually create honeycomb, by creating spherical dots, points of information. And in the universe, once a point of information exists as a plasmoid, it starts to create this shape, and the shape emanates outwards. Gosh, I need a drink. But as you can see, there's actually a reason that we have not only nested circles and spheres, but ultimately nested hexagons and primitive solids, not only in nature and structurally as human beings, but also embedded into the geology of all planets and all things. And so this is the reason we actually have the shapes that are on the moon. I know it looks like a kind of train wreck, but yeah, I saw Buddy. I gave a shout out to Buddy because he's killing it on the Thunderbolts Project presentation, on Thunderbolts Project videos that he's doing. I don't want to say I'm envious because I think he's brilliant, so it's great that he's doing it. I want to do my own, but I will ultimately do it probably at some point. I'll make some sort of full-on presentation about this, but meanwhilst I shall do these types of things live. So yeah, so think about it. In, I don't know, 10 minutes, with a very crude drawing with terrible scope drift, I was able to illustrate two major principles about lunar geology and all geology in general, which is the fact that this concept that things are circular is really like this ad hoc abstract way of looking at things, as opposed to actually looking at things and seeing the hexagons and the primitive geometry. And once you see that, asking the next question, which is why do these shapes appear? And then you realize that they can only appear if you have this very organized structure to reality, which is this torus shape with a nested hypotrochoid or hourglass shape. And it's recursively fractal, so it happens at all scales. As soon as there's a point of consciousness resonating in the ether, this shape is emergent, and the shape allows conscious points in the ether to self-echo, self-resonate, and that's how we have consciousness. Tiny bubbles. And then ultimately death is the bubble popping, right? And then we return to source, or the ether, and then we return to bubbles in some sort of resonant form. So matter arises from consciousness, which is really a very interesting way of thinking about it. Miguel, have a great night. I'm feeling the sleep too, but I'm going to go for a little bit longer here. Thanks for joining, as always. As always. Yeah, so the sharpness tonight is kind of mind-boggling. I don't know if y'all can see how crazy it is, but like this is probably the sharpest of 2022 by far. Like, it's remarkable. So yeah, not only does this geometry, fundamental geometry of nature, not only underscore all of geology, but it actually outlines all the things that we see. So I guess I'm going to go off on a rant here, but so I was talking about people not considering the possibility that long-scale erosion and long-scale earthly aging might have taken place in a much shorter period of time. That's one large thing. Why is that important? I mean, it really, well, it's kind of self-evident, but how can one think about it? I think the reason it's so prevalent and people don't tend to question the age of Earth or the age of fossil record or dendritic aging, or, you know, I rattle off these things, but I rattle them off because it is actually a finite set of things. So if you look up how do we age things or how do we date things, you'll realize that there are only 2 to 3 really useful ways of dating things on Earth. And they've created some other ways to extrapolate data, but ultimately, if you look at the fact that the Earth is an electrical vessel of sorts, and it's all based on resonance and interconnectivity, that thinking about dating methods as a linear function and thinking that the way half-life decay behaves today is the way it behaved, I don't know, 50,000 years ago, is speculation, is not really something that can be proven, even though the consensus science says that that's the way things are. So I don't mind sounding, you know, people may think, oh, that's so crazy, how can you even think about that? But it certainly is interesting to look into how these techniques are used and how much is extrapolated versus how much can really be proven. So that's a really interesting concept, and it factors into, of course, electric universe history and also how we interpret the fossil record and where humans appeared along the timeline. So I guess that takes me to the fact that I was listening to this idea about, oh, was Darwin wrong? You know, what's the missing link? Where did humans come from? And I always think about those videos and think, like, why do people talk about it in terms of humans are different than everything else? Humans are exactly like everything else on Earth. In fact, like, everything else exists in relation to us as kind of a mirror. Animals, trees, water, etc. So this idea that somehow there was a point in time where there was all this bunch of other stuff, and then something happened, and then humans. It's just this weird way of thinking about it. Even free thinkers and people who seem progressive about, you know, awareness, and consciousness and physics tend to think about it from this very closed-minded view of like the Earth is this old, science is lying about all this other stuff, but age of the Earth, they got it down. And I'm like, I'm not really so sure that's the case. And then two, what that implies is that like emergent consciousness could have emerged at any point, and consciousness emerged at all points, on Earth. So humans arose with animals, with bacteria, with trees, with mushrooms. Like this idea that somehow there's everything and then humans. It's like, it's so silly, it makes like absolutely no sense. Man, I'm on the creakiest chair imaginable, but whatever. So, okay, so fossil record, dendritic ridges. There's, I'm mixing my two things, but dendritic tree root dating, so counting tree rings. Let's see. I mean, how many do they really count, right? The obvious question. Like, how many rings do you actually count and say, okay, this tree is this old? And if you look into those experiments and those studies, and you actually talk to people who do it, you realize that, again, these ages are extrapolated. Anything beyond 10,000 years is basically extrapolated, and therefore I guess it gets complicated, but imagine massive electric discharge, comets, Earth being a different size, Earth having different nitrogen in the atmosphere, different chemical composition, different electrical charge in the air, any number of factors of electrical nature that could have changed the field or the aura or the current of Earth, changing entirely, like things like the way light interacts, the way plutonium decays, the way carbon decays, and yeah, these things are definitely just, I don't want to say up for interpretation, because they're not really up for interpretation. It's just that they're so fundamentally locked into the idea, the sphere of consciousness, that it's very hard to consider an alternative. The alternative being that we don't know exactly how old things are, but it's possible that things are recent, and it's possible that things are really old. That's actually the thing that I would replace the concept, the thought with. I wouldn't say I know exactly how old this thing is, but I would say that there's no reason that Earth has to be 13.4 billion years old. And there's no reason that the moon has to be 4 billion years old. Not Earth. I mean, the universe has to be 13.7 billion. There's just no reason for that to be the case, even though that's how people want to, certain organizations want to measure it and have this perfect, fixed point. But as we know, if you really look at yourself and reflect on consciousness, there's nothing that's actually fixed. So this idea that things are fixed, there was this point that was fixed. There's no fixing. Like, things are kind of always moving like a wave. So what was the other thing I was thinking about? So of course there's field consciousness, massive upending of the way people think about neuroscience and memory. You go to a neuroscientist and ask them about where memory is stored, and they'll tell you, oh, you're, here and there, and we took pictures and sliced the brain, and it lights up here and here and here. And then you have other, maybe cognitive neuroscientists or, philosophers even, thinking about how, the human brain is a receptor. We tune into life, which, I kind of make fun of it, but it's not, it's not untrue. It's true. That's what we actually do, is we tune into the field. But I think the way they say it, I don't think they really understand that it's actually a field, like of plasma that is encoded with our memories and thoughts and actions, and that we carry our field with us wherever we go. And it's tethered to our plasmoid system, our chakra stack, which are like a set of plasmoids, and each of these plasmoids has its own field. And each field, like the mind field and the heart field and the stomach field, that's how things have brains, membranes. and consciousness exists as an interaction between self and other being field, self being chakra or plasmoid. That being a much more logical explanation for aura in terms of, you know, bringing New Age thinking into physics, and then much more logical than slicing the brain and saying, oh, memories are inside the head, inside the skull. In fact, what's more interesting is that we are inside our own field of consciousness. So we're inside consciousness, which is really amazing because it actually intertwines the human to other, self and other. And this is the awareness of enlightenment, I think. There's nothing more than realizing that you're already doing the most incredible thing ever, which is existing. Cybercelli is saying, let's see, if you truly consider what theories are, they're nothing more than someone's wild-ass guess that cannot be proven. I mean, some are, some aren't. You know, there's nothing I guess it's kind of difficult to talk about maybe overcoming traditional theories and replacing them with new concepts. That's maybe more where I would go with it. Because theory ends up, not to, you know, pardon the pun, but sullies the discussion sometimes between people, because they're like, oh, that's just a theory, that's just a concept, like you're just guessing. But I don't think, you know, sometimes you can answer things. And I think part of maybe the larger, you know, mental propagandic conspiracy is that the system or the powers that be encourage this idea that people are pretty stupid and people are pretty mean, and that people can't learn, you know, and to make the populace feel small and disempowered. And whereas when you really understand how powerful the human is already, it's pretty incredible, right? And you can choose, one can choose to take that power and say, hey, that's something I want to embrace, or something I want to ignore. But ultimately, when you pull physical consciousness, like existing in this reality, and you say, hey, I want to understand more about how I interact with reality, this idea of the field and this idea of resonant consciousness and electric universe, I say electric universe, it's almost like cliched at this point, like to call things by a ubiquitous, you know, title like that. But really, it's an interconnected electrical universe, which means we're just connected by wires, and things are bubbles, and at the center of bubbles, these centers of bubbles experience these bubbles, and the bubbles experience the points, and they exist and pop, and they exist and pop and exist and pop, and that's what life and death is. And it's a really cool way of looking at the world in a way that engages the self, but also says really everything is kind of, you could choose to see everything as pointless, but in fact by existing at all you have purpose. But not everybody's going to see that ultimately, because of the actual relationship of size proportion between the bubble and the node, this kind of 90-10 split in terms of what we see as volumetric space, is the divide that we have between scientific free thinkers and so-called sheep who will follow, you know, whoever decides, whoever spits out the juiciest next theory, versus, like, I don't know, and it's even hard to talk about it because it sounds like I'm trying to evangelize the concept of the electric universe, but to me, there's some deeper kind of calling that says, hey, share what you know and share what you can with the few people that give a shit. But ultimately, it's really something that most of us have to, not have to, but can enjoy and learn about on our own, really. I mean, the moon is just one way of experiencing your connection with the universe, but I see Michigan Woodland Warrior in the chat. What's happening? Staying humble. Good. Good, good, good. Electron flood theory. What's that? Or maybe that's just a title I haven't heard before. Sounds cool. NGC says, I'm like a cat. I like to build up static and zap people when I walk past them. It's like a rap haiku. Anyway, yeah, so consciousness, age of the universe, how things interact, the shape of craters on the moon. What have I not talked about? What was it? Well, how we make our own bodies, we make our own eyeballs, and we put them in the correct places. Yeah, okay. Good time to pause and play some tunes here. Coming up on 3 a.m., East Coast, edge of space, yet another ride to the moon. I love it. If you're catching this tomorrow, I hope you're having a good day. And yeah, I think this is close to full, really. It's very, very close. So, yeah, quickly, now I remember what I was going to talk about. That last topic was the James Webb Telescope released these photos, which are just amazing, but also completely expected in this weird, I don't want to say expected, I guess, like, it's really hard to talk about the James Webb Telescope from loving space and loving telescopes, like, a lot, and sound like a downer about it. But it's just one of these things that is just so kind of It's just weird and Twilight Zone-y how, well, it's not really. I understand because, like, basically, like, they're gathering data for parties that are not going to be public about it. And the stuff that's going to be public about it is just, like, one or two photos here and there, and they're just going to make these kind of, you know, just inane headlines about it. So I shouldn't expect anything. But anyway, just to talk about it, the photos are incredible, and they are the sharpest photos we've ever seen of certain parts of nebula and galaxies and quasars. But ultimately, it is kind of taking pictures of stuff we not only know is there, but it's not going to be different stuff. And really what's ultimately the huge discovery here is that no matter how sharp the photo, ultimately things are the same. And that's really like a really interesting Zen kind of koan in a way. Like if it makes me kind of sad that science has all this money and all this brain power, but they don't think about things in this kind of Zen way, which is the fact that, like, you could build the most sharp telescope, and ultimately the real realization is that the universe is telling you that no, these spirals are recursive throughout the universe, and here's proof. It's yet another piece of evidence that you're not going to find this ultimate thing. Same thing with string theory, where you're not going to find this ultimate God particle to find the last, because the concept of existing at all means that a particle will continue to avoid detection, because that's the grand illusion, that's the grand dream. Things just don't exist beyond a certain point. So you're going to keep finding things and keep finding things, and if you find it, then it exists. And that's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So James Webb is going to take these incredibly high-resolution photos of things we know exactly, that we know fundamentally actually exist in this recursive geometric way. But then they're going to talk about, like, all this other nonsense about how just sorry to be such a downer about it. It's so weird, but you know, Einstein and Hubble were wrong. Let's see. Go back to the top. CERN calls them tetraquarks. Yes, and those galaxies. So the tetraquarks, I don't dismiss this stuff as like not being real. The stuff is real. It's just that you could keep reducing things ad infinitum, and as long as you ultimately detected them, the very detecting of them is what brings them into reality. So reality is a self-fulfilling, is a creation of the mind, is mind creating matter, not matter creating mind. And so these machines, CERN and LHC and James Webb, even this telescope, ultimately don't do anything more than just prove the obvious, which is that our skin cells look like the surface of the moon, and that is because we're grown from the same electrical filaments that are fractally recursive throughout the universe. Like, that's like a logical idea. Yo, more Jello, please. I'd like some Jello here. Light can speed up and slow down. I mean, well, because if light is resonance, then it can resonate at different frequencies, and therefore the medium by which you're experiencing light, or light traveling through, so to speak, can, thusly slow down and speed up light. So light doesn't actually travel as a photon packet, the way we have thought about it, but light actually is all these cascading fractal resonances in different formats. Like, so it's not just one thing, and it's not linear either. So it's very likely that depending on how tightly wound our Milky Way was to the Birkeland filament, like light speed as we perceive it as human temporal beings might have been very different. So it's weird to consider all types of things as this linear function of, like, now things are experienced this way, therefore history on Earth has always experienced things this way. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Alright, let me adjust this image here. Falling down on the job. Like, this filter is so cool, but it also takes away a lot of the moon. Look at that. 99.1 or something thereabouts. Nice Mare Frigoris up at the top, right above Aristarchus. You got Sinus Iridum, one of my favorite regions. Plato Crater, all the little mountain ranges in North Mare Imbrium. Pico, Mons Terra, Tenerife. I love that name. Tenerife, Montes Tenerife. And then you have Alpes, Valles Alpes, the Alpine Mountains. But you can see it very clearly, and what's so cool is that what I think about when I see these formations, Sea of Serenity, Sea of Tranquility, or Mare Imbrium and Sea of Serenity, this is the same as the bridge of your nose. The reason human beings and animals have a nose bridge and have eye sockets is the same reason that there is a giant concave, convex, sorry, right? Convex? Concave? Anyway, a hollowed out region of the moon, a scoop out of the moon. Let me not say this incorrectly. Concave. 3 in the morning, checking. Having an outline series curves inward. The surface area, so convex. But it's not even convex, really. Like, we don't exactly know. Right? There's this idea that these, like, Sea of Serenity is extremely deep and then it was filled up with lava. However, maybe the surface of the moon was always just these you know, these 2 different layers that we see, and that electrical arcing just removed the kind of white layer and showed us the bottom layer, right? It would be completely against the idea that we had huge meteoric impacts in Sea of Serenity and Tranquility and Imbrium, and then because of these impacts the moon boiled and molten lava, so to speak, I guess, came through the surface and then cooled, and that's how we have these giant oceanic basalt regions. But maybe these regions are, you know, very thin, you know, in a way, and layered, and then you have the regolith on top of it that was carved away by blasting, more like, you know, car paint, when you chip that away and you really see the rust underneath the paint. And, you know, you really consider the moon in a different light if you think about it like that. What other features tonight? I mean, all the features tonight. But yeah, that's what I was saying about the eye sockets. So the reason we have eyeballs is because matter is compressed at the very, you know, at the center, like a spiral galaxy, along, and the eyeballs appear at the center of the eye sockets. And the eye sockets appear because there's this cross-section of a torus. The fundamental geometry of the universe is this nested toroidal, nested hyperbolic geometry. It's so, I mean, of course, I say these 2 shapes, but it's all the shapes, really, kind of. If you look at it from the top, it's the golden mean spiral, and you have harmonic ratios as these shells go outward, so we don't really see the plasma shells of consciousness along these geological shapes, but they're implied. So if you look at an apple core or an apple itself, you can imagine the apple core, you can imagine the flesh. Michigan says Big Bang could not have created the eye. But I don't know, I think, like, if we think about it, that the Big Bang actually was just like a membrane hitting another membrane. Almost like, I guess there are much larger concepts at play, which are the fact that the human body is actually powered from the outside by electricity, and our eyes actually shoot out rays, and the ear sends out signals, and the nose sends out a signal, and these signals are these kind of ambient signals that we can tune and focus, And this is how we actually engage the world. So not only do we interact with our field, but we interact with other people's field. And this is something that's really much, like, very fundamental to the whole concept of reality. It's just, it belies, it underlies so many different ideas in terms of, you know, travel and what it means to be alive and feelings and actions, and existence at all, is the fact that there is this relationship between self and field, and yet, you know, field can store information perpetually. So field must exist at human level, it must exist at bacterial level, and it must exist at, you know, mega consciousness levels. So the eyeball, right? The eyeball is actually a manifestation of this geometry. It does. It impinges the electrical current or the toroidal flux that oscillates around the node that is the bridge of our nose. At the top of our nose, there's this pinch, and this pinch actually pulls matter, I think, and creates eyeballs. This is like, there's really no other explanation as to why things are placed where they're placed, and it's so geometrically sound. It's perfect, and so you have complete ability to create a billion people. I mean, 7 billion, 8 billion, 2 billion, all the people, and have them look slightly different, but based on a template. The template is so perfectly sound, and, you know, pun, you know, unintended, but perfectly, like, reasonable pun, because it is sound. Ultimately, it's resonance and plasma, but the geometry is perfectly structured to create humans and animals and trees, and place everything in the correct place for things to work. Always. And it also happens to also be able to be seen in all geological formations, in skin cells. If you look at your skin under a microscope, it's nested hexagons. I mean, it's just like, there's no, I personally have, you know, like, if you know my channel, then you know I've really dug deep, and if you look up these questions are not really answered in a holistic, fundamental way. They're speculated upon, and there are headlines and there are papers about certain, you know, disciplinary topics, but, you know, specialized topics, but you don't ever hear the reason the moon looks the way it does is the same reason your hand has all these Lichtenberg patterns along it. Even if your skin just is pinched, it pinches in a way that looks exactly like sinuous rills that come emanating from Copernicus. And there's no, I think, that I've heard, understanding or theory about why that's the case. So for me, it's just like so clear that if you just even consider the idea that things are fundamentally formed along the same geometry, then there you go. You have this template that can create all forms of life slightly differently. It's like a randomizer. Yeah, like cymatics. So yeah, I think the whole thing with cymatics is the reason we see those, and the reason we're so kind of enamored with them is, I think, like, memories and life in our field are actually stored as these three-dimensional cymatic shapes, these very complex, tiny, almost like, you know, atomic structures that look like the big cymatics we see on Chladni plates, or that Rupert Sheldrake takes pictures of. But, like, I think these tiny little knots, that's what memories are, right? So it's tightly wound water, and it's trapped in membranes, like invisible membranes, and that's why memories can change, and that's why some memories are stronger than others, because of the distance to the source, to self, and also the increased resonance or decreased resonance of these memories and the twistingness of that toroidal knot of that memory. And that's why, like, you can think about something and think about all these different aspects of it, because within this fractal cymatic knot of water, it can store all the aspects of life as a memory. Smell, taste, feeling, place. You can have a completely holographic experience from a tiny cymatic knot. This is how memory is likely stored in the cloud. And the thing is, we're already doing it with computers. So why is it so hard to imagine that humans have already been storing information in the cloud, so to speak? Z Proxy, what's up, old buddy? I hope you're doing well. Michigan Woodland says, space is so biological, it's not funny. Yeah, right? I mean, why don't we have discussions about, I know people would say, oh yeah, you don't even know, though, you don't go to university and like you don't read the papers. There is astrobiology, but it doesn't need to be endlessly researched. There is a way to actually have an answer for things. I'll make an analogy about baking a cake, right? You can endlessly discuss baking a cake, but at some point somebody has to bake the damn cake, right? Like, you could say, oh, if we put the yeast and we put the sugar and we used margarine and we used a cake pan, we preheated the oven and all this stuff. But at some point, a person can take a set of very complex ingredients and then do like some sort of magic and put them in a bowl and mix them up in a spiral, twist them up in a spiral, and then convect them by impinging heat spirals down upon them, and perform alchemy and boost the nutrients or destroy the nutrients from these little newly materialized, newly morphed pieces of ether. It's really fascinating, but my point wasn't really about like how cool food is, but how you could endlessly talk about complex things, but sometimes you can actually complete complex things. So I don't think we need to continue like for hundreds of years to keep smashing atoms together to ultimately find smaller and smaller particles, right? Because the evidence is just showing you that no matter how small it is, things look the same. And that should prove a much larger and much more important point. And then two, same thing with large things. The deeper into space you look, the further things appear. And the reason for that is because as soon as you look at things, things appear. Because consciousness is self and other, is you looking at things, and things appear because you look at them. And we think that that doesn't happen, but that's the only way things could actually happen. Yeah, we know that water has memory, right? And water can be affected by intention and thought and talking to. But think about very complex water, different forms of, the human body is a form of water, right? But I think like our field, right, our bubble that we carry around with us from country to country and from neighborhood or whatever, this field has invisible, like very kind of quantum toroidal cymatic water knots, and these knots can hold entire world in each knot, and that's how we can store vast amounts of information, not only take it with us wherever we go, but also access it at any moment by just looking into our field and resonating with that particular cymatic knot. And the reason we can resonate with it is because we've been there before, therefore we have the coordinates of this sympathetic resonance. This is how I imagine telepathy might work. Gosh, I want some cake too. I'm out of food. But yeah, so thanks for reminding me that the cake analogy is just that. Okay, so stop smashing things to find smaller things. Stop making giant telescopes to search deeper into, like, I don't mind, I love telescopes, but like, let's look at the moon up close. you know, with a giant, like an absolutely mega telescope. This idea that, like, looking into nebular clouds that were already so, first of all, Hubble took amazing shots of exactly the same thing. So these shots are basically just much higher definition shots of similar things. Granted, I can't naysay because I love telescopes and I think it's great, but also let's see shots of Neptune, you know, and like just insane shots of what Neptune looks like right now, or shots of Mercury or Venus, like crazy things, or like the moon, certain parts of the moon that we can't see from Earth, and live stream it. So I'll always have this kind of counter opinion of how, you know, corporate technology is used, because I have my own opinion on things, but I'm just talking about conceptually. You know, looking into space forever is only just going to prove that things look the same in terms of this fundamental geometry. So why is that important? It's important because as soon as, like, you understand that that's the case, that there is this fundamental underlying geometry, then you have to ask why. And from the why, you realize that it can only be connected via electrical filaments, electrical lightning bolts, giant cosmic lightning bolts, static charge, red sprites, on and on and on, versions of the so-called lightning bolt at all scales. And this is the interconnectivity of all things, the web of life, so to speak. And this is the baking the cake, right? You can ask forever, oh, is it connected? Are things really connected? Maybe they're connected. Was it possible that they're connected? And then contemporary science will be like, we can never know. Humans are so stupid. You'll never know the nature of God. Da da da, and on and on and on. But then the person says, you know what, I'm going to make the cake. They go into the kitchen, they take all the ingredients, and they make the damn cake. And the damn cake is saying, okay, actually, no, there's this, clearly we see lightning bolts. Clearly we see static charge. Clearly we see red sprites. Clearly we see the aurora borealis. Clearly we see the sun and cosmic filaments. So these things must all be intertwined. And then also, if we look at the neurons in blood, they all look the same. Wow, that's interesting. That's all connected. Then, therefore, they're connected. Bake the cake. You know, it's just bake the damn cake. But of course, baking the cake means you have to keep baking cakes in order to make money. And right now they're saying, I promise I'll bake you a cake at some point. And so neuroscience and string theory, they're just going to keep going, ultimately never really finding an answer, because the goal is to not really find the answer, which is, I think, where we are right now. But things have changed online, right? Like 10 years ago, the stuff that you find today is vastly different on YouTube. All theories are entertained. Everybody's tired of the theories. But if you really look, you can find whatever you're really looking for in terms of plasma physics, electric universe stuff. It's all there. And then from there, you can pretty much derive everything else. That's kind of an oversimplification, but that's my cake. Neptune tune. Michigan says, smallest particles that matter is the electron neutrino white side and muon neutrino the dark side of the electron dipole. I just feel like there is no ultimately smallest size. Excuse me. And there's no largest size. Hot damn. Little break. alright, yeah, I'm alright. That was just a cough that I had to cough. Had to cough and take off. So it's getting a little late. It looks so nice and sharp, but I'm getting achy. So I think I might wrap it up here, y'all. It's been a nice, fun, a little ranty show, a little bitchy show. I don't know. Maybe I'm you know, cynic. I know I might sound like a total cynic about shit, but I feel like I come here to share just some ideas that interest me, and I appreciate everybody who joins me. Thank you so much, Cybercelly, NGC, have a wonderful day. Michigan Woodland Warrior, thanks for the great conversation. Lene, Ann, thanks so much for joining. If it was your first time, I think it's the first time I've seen you here, so welcome to the channel. It's super fun having you. Who else we got? Z-Proxy, having my morning coffee, enjoy your day, good sir. Miguel, I know, is here for a second. Truman, and that's it. A couple more minutes here and play a jam or two and finish up my rant, but just quick. So infinite in both directions, right? Like, no need to have an absolute beginning of something or an absolute end of things, even though it could be that way. And then, yeah, I think the ability to be able to discuss ideas without completely having to throw out your own beliefs is really another part of science that maybe it's getting a little better. So I'm optimistic. And Monarch Love popping in here. It's so late. Or maybe you're just waking up. Kisses to you. Look at this sharpy sharp moon. It's so damn sharp. I can't even. Coughing is always better than I don't know, I don't cough very often. That was just one very suppressed cough from talking and talking. So yeah, I checked out Stellarium, and it seems like Jupiter and Saturn are starting to come up in at a more reasonable hour. I'd really like to get some planetary action. Awesome, awesome. Cool. Well, if you're checking this video out tomorrow, I'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Let's find a song to take us out on this beautiful trip. Yeah, I got to say pretty much everything. I can obviously talk about so much more all the time, but there will be time for that. Remember, nested hexagons. Actually, just look at yourself in the mirror and kind of think about the bridge of your nose and the shape that makes, and those kind of side-by-side hexagons. And then look at your jaw and your cheeks, and you'll see all these shapes within your face. And so then you can think about, like, why is it like that? And why are all these creatures similar? And it makes so much sense that it's actually both awe-inspiring and revelatory, as well as calming and empowering. It has all these different emotive qualities when you kind of really resonate with that concept of self and other being a product of the same thing, and being, I don't want to say codependent, but co-resonant and co-creating. Thanks, Zorro. Thank you. Thank you, NGC. I want to put up some new music too soon. Let's go off with Dreamboat, right? Or something calmer. Maybe calmer. Alright, y'all. Much love. See you soon, Captain signing out.
I'll be like you in your heart, smile like sapphire on a saffron sun. I'll be like you do, we'll stand upon the shores of water.